Warning. This show features dark subjects which may be triggering to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Hello everyone, welcome to Chaos Jar. I'm J Wes Secord, the loud and obnoxious one. Hey, we have our big bag of facts, Bad Ben.
Hey!
Good. And lastly, as always, we have AT Token. He enjoys being on this show.
This is what they tell
He truly does.
That's what we told you to say. Now fucking say it.
I did say it.
No, say that you love this show.
I definitely love this show. Help.
That's not on the cue card.
Please said help.
All right. And as always, we have a nice dark topic today, I think.
Not just me.
I will... Oh, you. Now, what's the topic of today?
All right, so today we're going to talk about the King of Clipperton Island.
Ooh, the Clipperton Island. Is
like
it the hairdressers? I could really use a haircut right now.
I think a lot of people could in this, whole thing that we can't say that's not advertiser friendly.
Yeah. In all fairness, though, this Friday the restrictions will be going down.
Only here in Ontario.
Yes, right in Canada Town, USA.
Yeah, in Middle Dakota.
Sorry, in Middle Dakota.
Now, welcome to the Chaos Verse.
The Chaos Verse. No, the Black Atmos verse.
Oh, yeah, the Black Atmos verse. Yep, I'll give you that. Oh, my God.
So, I love my portmanteaus.
Obviously, we are super organized today.
I'm going to need to start drinking for this.
I'm surprised you haven't already.
What's in the flask, then?
Yeah.
Acid.
So anyway, tell us more about Clipperton Island.
Well, before we do that, a little bit of house cleaning. Please rate and review. It's really, really important. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, at BA Chaos Jar. On Facebook, it's still Pandora Jar Podcast. We're slowly trying to fix that. Facebook just doesn't want to seem to work with us. And at Patreon, Chaos Jar. It all pops up there. Yeah,
all of that stuff. You'll even see great photos of me dancing in my underwear to rock and roll.
How did we lose money on that?
What? Yeah, what? What? Is this thing working?
All right, so Clipperton Island. For this whole thing, we're going to go back in time quite a ways. And we're going to go pretty far.
Well, get ready to doodaloo together. Back in time at Clipperton Island.
Can I get that last 30 seconds back, please?
Does that help?
All right. So...
a one-man high school band.
Thank you.
Not a compliment.
Yeah, I'm taking it as such.
So anyways, Clipperton Island is a coral atoll in the Pacific Ocean. Do you know what an atoll is?
No.
So an atoll or atoll is basically a little bit of land that's basically made up of like coral and has like a ring shape around it. So think like... coffee cup stains or like...
Yeah.
So that would be the coffee cup main portion would be the actual like dirt and everything around it. And then right in the middle, there's always like some sort of lagoon in the middle of it.
Oh, okay.
Like a hollow island.
Yeah. So like there's quite a few of them. They're basically just big ring-shaped islands that are very like narrow and just have a body of water right in the middle of them.
It almost feels like a weird alternate version of an oasis.
Kind of.
Except not in a desert, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. But this island actually, like, it kind of like borders on that whole atoll thing. Because during the low tide, the coral reef is actually really exposed, which then basically just makes it an island with a barrier reef in it. but it's all based on the tides, right?
That I feel bad for the fish that like live in those coral reefs, and they're like, oh, well, the tide's going down today. I know, Reginald. What are we gonna do? Actually, this is a different character, and somehow I just made it into this.
There's fish that lives in puddles.
Yeah. I believe I'm dying, Reginald. Oh, Frederick, save me!
What you're all missing, and I eventually have to get a camera for this, is the fact that he's using his hands as puppets.
Giant puppet English fish.
I talk with my hands, but sometimes I get very theater and I forget that people can't see me.
Stops you.
I
like to imagine it in front of me, okay?
So just to set your mind at ease, there actually is no fish in the lagoon. It's all just water. It's in this actual island, it's actually the way that the land is shaped. The water inside of it is actually fresh water. It's kind of dirty and mucky, but it is drinkable. People have proven that. There's been a lot of castaways on there.
Okay. I was just about to ask, I feel bad for the guy who you know what? I'm going to check this water.
So is the island
a little mucky?
Populated?
Pardon?
Is the island not populated?
It is uninhabited at the moment.
Okay.
We're going to kind of go over the history of it. It's roughly 6 kilometers squared, or 2.3 square miles, for those of you who don't know the metric system. It's just in size. The island is 1,080 kilometers away from southwest of Mexico, which is 671 miles. And the closest land is Socorro Island in the Ravillagigedo archipelago. That was quite a thing.
I'm impressed with that. It was a tongue twister, and the word archipelago was in there. It's like an up and down of fucking linguistics there.
Yeah. Well, it's just off the coast of Central America, so it's very low lying with an average land elevation of 2 meters or 6.6 feet. So during low tide, like I said, coral reef is exposed, so that makes it technically not an atoll, but an island with a barrier reef. In the middle of the island is a large lagoon filled with stagnant fresh water. It is an overseas state currently, private property of France. And between May and October, it's normally relentlessly barraged with storms.
This is this the day where I have to take over?
I have no idea. The worst thing is, there's a lot of names in here that are messed.
Oh my god!
So
write your letters to.
As far as we can tell, the island was discovered by Alvaro Saavedra Cedron.
Do you need a hand?
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm just saying. On the 15th of November, 28, the fish are going to help me now, huh?
I do believe we should help him, Reginald. I'm no Frederick. He needs a little bit of assistance with his language. Oh. They also speak into the mic, too. That you should also add that part.
They face the mic when they speak. Yeah, so it was discovered by Alvaro there on 15th of November, 1528. So it was then lost, and it was later rediscovered on Good Friday, April 3rd, 1711, by Martin de Chassidon and Michel de Bocage.
Oh, so, those you can say.
Of course I can. I'm French. They gave it the name Ile de Passion and claimed it for France while making up the first maps of the island. In 1725, Bocage led a scientific expedition and lived on the island for several months. France formally claimed the island in 1858. However, the first European to be recorded to have set foot on the island is John Clipperton, an English privateer and pirate.
A pirate?
Yeah.
And his name was Clipperton?
So privateers and pirates are kind of like on the border edge, and a lot of privateers became pirates after the wars were over. But yeah, his name was Clipperton. He was a pirate.
Clipperton is like the greatest pirate name because, oh my god, people would just be like, is that a nickname? What is he gonna like? What is he gonna do? Is he gonna cut off something? Like my hair?
Yes, he was a pirate barber and
a barbeteer.
A barbeteer. He was a private barbeteer.
If we had cameras, all you would see is me shaking my head.
Yeah. You just look so upset. It is hilarious.
So, as I was saying, he used the island as a base for raids on shipping. He would raid Spanish ships coming in from Mexico. Clipperton was a pretty interesting guy on his own. He was known to be a blunt, plain-spoken sailor, but he was also a very formidable, like, seaman and sailor on his own.
Formidable seaman.
Yeah.
I did not giggle at that. No,
I don't know.
The smile on your face is otherwise.
He was also known for quick, fierce rages, but was really quick to be settled down. Like, so I guess he would just get mad really quickly, but then they settle him down super quickly during this rage. But once he did settle down, he would then try to, like, settle all the misdeeds that he would do in his rage. So I guess if he, like, threatened to kill you, he'd try to be like, you know what, Wes, I didn't mean that. Like, we're sorry.
As you're bleeding out.
That's so interesting. Random anecdote. I came up with a pirate character in D&D, and I kind of came up with a similar personality. I think I'm going to research this guy a little more and make this character based on him. Because that's crazy how close that was.
J Wes Clipperton?
No, his name is Captain Karen Sully.
Ah.
I like the name. Shut up. Keep going. It's your thing.
All right. So he wasn't on the island for very long. And then, like I said, Bocage, one of the guys that rediscovered it in 1711 and called it Ile de Passion, which is Passion Island in French, which did not stick.
I wonder why.
But yeah, he then went and lived on it for a little bit. But the island did become named Clipperton Island because of John Clipperton. Like, it's an obvious segue over. He did use the caves for, I guess, storing a lot of the goods and stuff like that when he was doing these raids on ships. The island has a prominent amount of guano, and this led to rushes.
Yeah! Guano, baby!
Led to a rush of claims from France and Mexico and the United States.
For those not in the know, poop is useful for making gunpowder. And
I was just about to explain that, so thanks.
Yeah, specifically, guano is bat poop.
Or bird poop. It can be either or.
Really? I thought it was very specifically bat.
No, it can be either or. And apparently this stuff is actually very high quality. So
that, folks, quality.
It's like the guano market. The guano market actually was a huge thing back in the day because of the fact that it does make gunpowder, and it can be used as fertilizer and all these different things. So much so that in 1856, the United States actually came and basically began mining this guano off the island. Using the Guano Island Act, which was an act that was passed by the United States that enables citizens of the United States to take possession in the name of the United States of unclaimed islands containing guano deposits.
What?
The island can be located anywhere so long as they are not occupied and not within the jurisdiction of another government. It also empowers the President of the United States to use the military to protect such interests and establish the criminal jurisdiction of the United States in these territories.
So, the United States has a shit act? We, as the United States, can claim any place that has unclaimed shit in it, as long as it is unclaimed shit.
And as long as the island is uninhabited, but that's where
sorry.
And it also says in this act, as long as it is not in the jurisdiction of another government, which is where this becomes very interesting, because the French claimed it, so did Mexico, and then the United States started popping in here. And while they were doing this, actually, the French did show up and basically kick them off of the island. This happened during Napoleon III's reign, which we're not talking about Napoleon Bonaparte. We're talking about his nephew, Napoleon III, so Napoleon Louis, who was actually emperor of France for a little while as well. He annexed the island in about around the 1840s or so, same time that Mexico was like making the claim on the island. But it didn't resolve any of the disputes because he annexed it didn't mean anything. However, in 1870, the French Empire came crashing down on him, and Napoleon was deposed, and it was obvious that in the grand scheme of things that the French army couldn't guard their interests. So Mexico then came and annexed the island on December 13th, 1897. And a colony was established there, and there were several military governors that were put in there, the final one being Ramon Arnaud from 1906 to 1916. We'll talk about him. He's a pretty big player in this story. During this whole thing, when they did make this colony, originally the British Pacific Island Company, while there was a dispute happening between Mexico, the France, and the United States about who owns the bird shit on this island, they kind of just showed up and made their own little colony and settlement there to mine this stuff. And so what happened was, at the time, the Mexican government was being led by President Porfirio Diaz. Okay, I got this now. And so he knew that he couldn't take on the British military, because that's why France and the United States weren't battling them, is because they had the best naval.
The Royal British Navy was.
Yeah, it was like the top of the line. So there's no way for them to take them out. So he just decided that he would allow the British to mine this guano off the island and have their settlement as long as they acknowledged that the island was property of Mexico and it was under their sovereign control. So, of course, the British were like, sure, no problem.
Yeah, whatever. We just want the shit.
That's essentially what happened, was that President Porfirio Diaz just knew that he couldn't take them on, so he just let them mine off the island. That same year that they made this whole claim, there was actually an erection of a lighthouse. I saw the face.
I'm fine. I know what a lighthouse is.
What we're talking about.
Very, very, very phallic object. Yeah. It was erected.
Yep, it was erected
on the island.
So
it has a big hole in the middle.
Big wet hole in the middle. Eventually, though, the British government did realize that while this was a premium quality guano, the cost of transporting it was very, very high, and it was very obvious that the island could never be self-maintained. Like, it could never maintain itself. You always had to bring in supplies.
No food source.
So, yeah, the land is very harsh and such. They had built, like, a colony there, like actual building structures and stuff like that. They even planted palm trees to try and help aggregate the soil. There was vegetable gardens that were planted there, but it just wasn't
nothing was sticking,
yielding enough to be able to actually, like, make these people be able to survive there on their own. So basically, they just decided it's not worth the cost anymore. And in 1909, the British left the island, except for one British man and his wife, who stayed behind as caretakers for the properties and the lighthouse and stuff. So,
what did they eat?
So, pardon?
I wonder what they eat.
Well, they would still get minor supplies. As I think part of the deal with President Diaz was this, because President Diaz, as soon as this happened, sent basically 100 people to the island to make a full colony and just live there in the British-made houses. And
this is ours, man.
Yep.
Except for those two British people, and they're like, oh, look, it's some people who will do our job for us.
So let's talk about President Diaz for a second, because he actually is a huge, part of this as well. Not in the grand scheme of playing this, but he actually is part of the reason that this whole tragedy happens. President Diaz is the president of Mexico.
Oh, shit. Really?
He was
Fuck! Everything I knew has been a lie. Wow. I can't be on the show anymore. It's just...
All right, so...
Can I go too?
No.
We will eventually talk about his whole regime and so on at some point, because it is a very interesting topic to put in the jar. So,
especially because he's the president of Mexico.
So he was a dictator of Mexico that took power in 1876. He was actually really good for Mexico. He provided a stable economy and really helped them grow. However, he really did like to trample on his people's freedoms. So that
what most dictators do. I thought that was their normal hobby.
Yeah, essentially.
And statues.
And statues. They also love statues. What a hobby. They can just stare at them for hours.
So.
Can't think of anybody nice who has a statue.
So, by 1910, the colony of the island had grown to be about 100 people. They were very dependent on bi-monthly shipments from one of the Mexican territories close by.
Okay, one of them.
Yeah, one of them.
Not a specific one, just one of them.
It's an 8.
Thanks.
You can't say it.
So. So Ramon Arnaud was the governor of Clipperton Island at this point. He didn't even want to be on Clipperton Island. However, he was made the governor, which seems like a really prestigious title, but it really isn't. This was actually more of a punishment because Arnaud was a deserter of the army who was tracked down and captured and then sent to the island as a punishment with his wife, kids, servants, so on.
There, you're now king of this shithole.
That's so unfair to the servants.
I mean, that's kind of the highlight of being a servant.
He just, well, guess we're going. And then the servant has to take their family along and so forth and so forth. Let's go live in this deserter's house. Ugh.
Well, the thing is, this kind of acted almost the same way as like how the British did this. So what the British used to do is, like, for instance, with Australia, they used to send criminals there, and it was actually like a punishment to like ward off doing certain misdeeds and so on. That's how some rapists managed to get over to like Australia. But you could also been sentenced to this whole. I think it was like a sentence of deportation or relocation or something like that. But
you could exile.
It's not actually exile because you can come back when your sentence is over.
Really?
Yes. However, when the British were doing this, the trek to Australia was actually really tricky, and the survival of it was basically if you got on a boat, you could look around, and from the time you're leaving to the time you get there, at least 3/4 of the people around you will be dead. So
nice.
I assume that that death toll isn't as bad nowadays.
No, but think about it then if you were being sent back. Think about it then if you were being sent back, trying to go back to Great Britain after your sentence is over. You might as well just stay where you are because you're probably going to die on the way back. So,
yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, so this is kind of how it acted. Was they kind of sent people that were kind of undesirable or so on. It wasn't exactly a official punishment. It was just more of a message sent that you're being punished to go here.
Well, in a way, it kind of is. Have you seen the creatures on that fucking continent? Like,
yeah,
their spiders are absurdly huge. Their moles are also anteaters and also porcupines, and they have 5 dickheads, and their beavers have duck bills and poisonous back feet, like that.
And they lay eggs.
Both of those lay eggs. They're from the same species family. God, like, that is a punishment. You just, like, open your fridge and there you go. There's a fucking giant ass, like, scarab going, it speaks and goes, and you're like, oh God, can I have the butter? And he's like, and he hands you the butter. And it's like, God.
Did you just come from like a bad family dinner?
Did you? Yes, I had a bad family dinner where there was a giant scarab at the table who went, and I asked him to pass me the butter once.
He was drinking from your flask at that time.
Yeah. This is how I grew up, with a giant scarab beetle that said,
Why?
Metaphor lost.
Back to Clipperton Island. So, Ramon Arnaud, he brought his wife along and his servants, so on. His wife's name was Alicia Rivera, or Arnaud. So, she came along as with. They had kids.
Yeah.
These servants come, they have kids, they have wives, and so on. So, part of this is we kind of have to have like a talk about, in 1914, the island started to fall into some trouble. The reason that they're falling into trouble is because of the Mexican Revolution. I'm going to kind of do a brief rundown of the Mexican Revolution just so it kind of sets some context to how these people kind of got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, because I know it, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who don't.
We'll probably cover it a little more in detail at some point.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
all right, so in 1908, Porfirio Diaz, the president of Mexico...
The president of Mexico!
...had announced that there would be a free and fair election for the presidency.
Totally buy that.
Diaz had wagered that by doing this and claiming he was going to retire, the people of Mexico would beg him not to retire so that he could come in at the last minute and just sweep the votes. And
did that not work?
Did not work out very well for him because Diaz trampled on the people's freedoms for 34 years. And people don't exactly... Yeah, he was in power for 34 years. So people did not really appreciate that. So when it became clear in 1910 that Francisco Mendírez was about to win, Diaz had him arrested.
This will be a totally fair election, guys. Fucking arrest that dude. He's winning. We don't want him.
So
he's like the Bernie of our country. We don't want him.
So this basically... Again, I'm asking for your support.
That was probably the most topical joke I've ever made in my life.
We don't like to get into politics here, but yeah.
That was the extent of it. Yeah.
So anyways, this was like a match in a keg of gunpowder. It just set off the revolution.
Basically spark.
Yeah. But... however, at first, it didn't really affect the residents of Clipperton because the bare structure of the government was actually still there, even as they overthrew.
Bear?
We're ignoring you now.
I'll just play on my phone.
Even even as they restructured the government and Diaz was removed from power. Well, yeah. They still were getting supplies at the island. It wasn't a big deal. They did it would be really weird though to think about the fact that this just happened and you're out there in the middle. The boat just shows up and goes, "Yeah, I got a new president, eh?" Like, he's Canadian.
They sent one Canadian to fucking tell them, "Oh, how's it going, eh? I just came back from Mexico. I'm here to tell you, you guys got a new president, eh?"
You're white.
No, if you excuse me, I'm gonna go off to the peelers. Do you guys have any toques?
So anyways, they survived the first patch of the revolution with...
actually kind of racist.
We can make that joke here in Canada Town, USA.
It's because we're Middle Dakota and there aren't any of those protections.
Yeah, exactly. We're like Little Canada, except a whole state of it. Or no, what?
Totally have states.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, in the United States of America. We are the 51st state of America.
Wow.
Okay.
So, as I said, they survived the first part of the revolution with Medeiros in charge. And they even survived a little bit after Medeiros was assassinated and replaced with Victoriano Huerta. In 1914, though, Huerta ran into exile after the Americans invaded Veracruz, and he basically spent 3 months trying to fight off Pancho Villa. And then eventually he ran off into exile just ahead of Pancho Villa's army. This caused the colony to basically be lost in the shuffle and forgotten.
Was that their uniform or their leader?
Oh.
This is the episode where I get very punny, and then everyone actually hates me.
I'm racist. Like, double down on the hate, why don't you?
Holy crap.
Hey, I'm not hating, I'm just being ignorant. There's a difference.
No, I'm hating you.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's racist. Now get back in your cage.
Fine, make your own lunch.
So, this colony to be forgotten. They received their last supply ship in the spring of 1914. No more supply ships arrived, and Ramon Arnaud realized that the island was now cut off. So, in the summer of 1914, the American Navy arrived at the island with a mission to evacuate the British caretaker and his wife.
Just them?
Just them. That was the mission.
Dick move.
They informed Arnaud of the situation in Mexico and also laid the news that World War I was underway after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which we'll talk about at some point as well, because it's a really interesting story.
So basically, hey, we're taking our guys and the world's on fire. Bye!
There's a little more to that.
Well, I also like that it was probably safer on that island while the rest of the world was at war.
Keep in mind they don't have food.
Oh, right. Well, they were getting it from them.
They're not getting.
They're not getting it anymore. It's been forgotten.
Oh.
So it's now been 2 months.
Bears all around. Yes,
so anyways, the American captain offered to evacuate the colonists alongside the British caretakers.
Yay.
Arnaud turned down the offer.
What?
It is believed that he might have done so out of duty to his country, or perhaps he felt the revolution would eventually stabilize and supply ships would start back up again.
A duty to the country that forgot him?
Yeah. However, he was very, very wrong. Luckily, the Americans did leave a little bit of supplies for them, but not much. So, by 1915, the supplies were dying down, and even the vegetable gardens that had been planted 10 years earlier were yielding nothing now. The diet of the colonists primarily became coconuts and crabs. This brought
crabs.
Yeah, because there's tons of crabs on this.
Early metaphors.
Speaks more about you.
I was actually going to make that joke earlier when I made that lighthouse joke about how the island has lots of crabs. So the fact that it actually just kind of rolled into that on its own, I'm very happy with this.
Wes is very pleased with himself right now.
Isn't that right, Reginald? Yes, yes, that is Wes. What about you, Frederick? Frederick?
So shout out to J Wes's crabs.
Frederick was taken away by the British.
He evacuated the island.
Evacuated the island. Boo! But they left poor Reginald.
I mean, you totally missed a poop joke. Evacuated the island?
Stop looking at me like that.
We don't have time for your highbrow humor. All right. So, this brought up malnutrition and an outbreak of scurvy, and it really devastated the population of the island. For those of you that don't know, scurvy, despite the fact that we do make jokes about it, scurvy dog with pirates and so on, is actually a very debilitating disease, and it essentially makes you start to bleed out, and eventually, from sores on your body, and then eventually you do perish from it. So the citizens
Doesn't it specifically affect the mouth?
Yeah, it starts to pull back the gums. You can develop sores on your body. It's very, very, very.
Isn't to prevent it something pretty simple like citrus and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's like vitamin C will kind of help it a little bit, but not entirely cure it or anything.
Oh, sorry, I meant help prevent it.
Yeah, that can help a little bit, but you basically just it's a major cause of malnutrition.
Oh.
Particularly on ships.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because when you're on a ship, you're eating basically supplies and so on, and so you're not eating the way that you should be.
Veggies go bad.
Yeah. So, one by one, they started succumbing to the disease, and by 1916, Arnaud was desperate for a solution to this. He realized that he made a mistake, and about a year later,
Jesus.
He had just watched the majority of the population die off. Something pretty much as 3/4 of the people who were part of this colony did die, and he knew the remainder weren't going to survive much longer. So someone spotted a ship in the far off distance, and this began a formulation of a plan. They were trying to jump and catch the attention, but as the ship got a little bit further away, Ramon Arnaud decided that they would take the only ship on the island, which was essentially a rowboat, loaded it up with all the men, and they would go brave the sea to try and get help from this passing ship. I
assume it wasn't very successful.
No. The surviving women and children watched in horror as the ship capsized and the men drowned in the ocean. Historians are kind of torn on this.
On what?
They're not sure.
You just sort of cut yourself off there, and then we were just sort of like, did the feed stop?
No.
Was there a glitch in the Ben?
They're torn on the fact that why the ship capsized. Basically, all that was seen was that the men eventually got up and began grappling with each other.
They really needed to fuck right then and there.
So wait,
that was what you took from that? That was a me joke.
So the theories as to what happened are a struggle did happen aboard the small ship. Maybe they were fighting. Maybe one guy was like, "This is pointless. We should just go back." There was a whole thing, and then eventually they fought until they capsized and fell into the ocean. The other theory is that perhaps there was a leak in the vessel, and them getting up was them trying to get around each other to try and bail the water out. Regardless of what happened, all the men basically lost their lives.
I have to imagine it was just that two guys were rowing and they bumped shoulders and stop that. No, stop. Dude, really, stop.
No way.
Okay, stop. It's like, Jerry, why are you fighting Jeff? And then they're trying to pull each other off. It's like, hey, he was bothering him. Get off of Jerry. And then it just sort of went from there, and everybody fought and fell off the boat.
And that's why we all died.
Oh my God!
This is a podcast of ghosts. We have all died.
Except for Token, who can just see us.
Yeah.
I'm ignoring
AT Token he's the medium, and we're the ghosts, and he's just imagining this entire podcast.
I like that I'm imagining I'm in a cage.
Yeah. You put yourself in there for protection, but your delusions made it seem like we're putting you in there.
Okay. So, Alicia Arnaud and all the other women on the island and the children on the island didn't have a lot of time to grieve because within 2 hours, the storm that had been out on the distance blew in, and this cyclone was insane. It essentially disintegrated a lot of the buildings, blew over trees, tore structures right apart.
After it disintegrated them.
Yeah. The survivors of the island ended up surviving by taking shelter in the basement of the houses, which, because of the way that they were built, is actually very, very solid. Mm-hmm. Just so happened that the moment that they were down there in the basement, Alicia, who was heavily pregnant, went into labor.
Oh,
good time.
My God, this is like the Quiet Place when you just when things got tense, there's another tense moment and it doesn't let you breathe.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So, she had a son. This was her fourth son. This is her fourth child, not her fourth son, but her fourth child. She named him Angel or Aniel, which is yeah. However, when they emerged to check on the colony after the storm was over, that's when they realized that everything was in ruins around them. And standing there in the carnage was a man they had forgotten about, the lighthouse keeper, Victoriano Alvarez. Alvarez was actually of African descent. He was...
No surprise.
I like the imagery. To me, I just
it sounds like an action movie, eh?
Yeah, he's the guy who conjured the tornado, and everyone pops up and is like, he's the god type of thing.
So, anyways, he had been marginalized for his African descent, which is a stigma in Mexico, especially at this time. This is why he basically isolated himself in the lighthouse. People kind of forgot that he was even there because they're not even sure how he really got supplies either, because they rarely ever saw him in town. The isolation was definitely not good for him either, and basically could put you into madness because you just get cabin fever and you're always isolated away from people.
And you can control tornadoes.
Apparently. That's what he was doing for all those years.
Yeah.
So, before the colonists had emerged, he had actually gone methodically, building by building, and through the debris and collected all the weapons.
Nice.
Yes! Good on him. I don't know why, but still.
Revenge, that's why.
So Alvarez was a very tall, very strong man, and he'd essentially been forgotten about. He'd survived the malnutrition somehow, and then he survived the storm.
So when they saw him from the rubble, was he just covered in ammo and guns?
No, he had gone and put them away. He had gone and put them away in the lighthouse, and apparently the only gun that he had managed to get was one rifle.
I like my version better.
Yeah. Believe me, you're not gonna like this guy for much longer. So.
He's
Alvarez, upon seeing the women and children, proclaimed himself as King Victoriano Alvarez, master of the island.
So he did go crazy. Got it.
And he told the women that they would be used for his amusement, and anyone who resisted would then be mutilated beyond recognition to teach a lesson to the others not to resist. There's actually an account which isn't completely verified or not, but essentially it was said that one mother and daughter pair refused to obey him. They were raped and then shot. So, what he did do was this. He would choose one woman to come back to the lighthouse with him, and he would then rape and abuse her until he grew bored of this woman, and then would switch the next one. He began with 20-year-old Altagracia Quiros, Then moved on to Roselia Nava, who was 13. Then went on to 20-year-old Tirza Rendon. Rendon was one of his favorites to beat on, mostly because she was the biggest thorn in his side. She was very vocal about how she was only submitting to his will because she couldn't find another way to escape, and she would often tell him about her disgust and hatred of him. So, King Alvarez basically just beat on these women every day for the next year, 18 months or so. He never did make any advances towards Alicia Arnaud, though. Probably because he thought about the fact that she was a governess. So, being the governor's wife, she was a higher class, and if anybody were to ever come from Mexico and actually save these women, he felt that the crimes against the lower class women wouldn't be as severe as they would be if he did do this to, a higher class woman. However, that is not confirmed. Nobody can know what was in his mindset at that time. And after about 18 months or so, as 1916 bled into 1917, and it looked like there was less and less hope of the survivors of the colony ever being saved, he did eventually, in July of 1917, show up and toss Tirza Rendon, the one that he hates the most, to the floor, then look at Alicia and order her to report to the lighthouse in the morning, as it was her turn now. Mm-hmm. So, that's when the women decided that they had to come up with some sort of way of at least taking him down and saving themselves. So the next morning, Alicia Arnaud did show up to the lighthouse, as she was supposed to. She had brought one of her sons with her, and she also brought Tirza Rendon with her. When they arrived, they witnessed a really rare sight. King Alvarez was smiling. He had just captured a bird and was basically proudly holding it, because that's a rare delicacy that you catch a bird. You don't have to eat crab or coconut for the day. And they thought that, basically the thought is that he had this rare delicacy and he was going to use this as a special occasion meal. The moment that he saw Tirza Rendon, though, that smile vanished. He began screaming, yelling, asking why Tirza was there, then asking why the child was there. And while this was all happening, Rendon snuck inside of the lighthouse. And while the king just kept raging and raging, she eventually emerged and crept up behind him. Eventually, he must have noticed, sensed that something was amiss, because as soon as he turned around, Tirza Rendon swung the hammer, and she managed to get at least 3 good shots in.
Nice.
And he was most likely laying there dead from a skull fracture from this, but her rage was so harsh that she then began basically stabbing and cutting him up.
It's pretty understandable.
And, oh God! This story was I'm glad this was the outcome, because I got really quiet because this started getting really, really bad. Before, there was just a couple stupid decisions happening.
Yeah,
that it was kind of humorous, but this is a real
this is really, really bad.
Yeah.
So her rage and actions brought a brutal end to the king of Clipperton Island. So almost immediately after this happened, that's when a U.S. Navy gunship, the Yorktown, was trolling through the Pacific Ocean in search of German U-boats. World War II, trying to find them. The men aboard actually noticed several women and children jumping around and calling out, so they came and saved them. The men on board asked for an account from the women, and the women reported everything that happened, except for one detail. They stated that Alvarez had died of scurvy. So, the men aboard the ship examined the 3 women and 8 children, and they were all suffering from malnutrition.
Sorry. That's the number 8? They didn't examine.
Yeah, they
women.
didn't eat children.
They didn't eat children.
They were really hungry.
The malnutrition was really bad.
I was thrown off for a split second when I heard that because you said it so quickly.
Wow.
I was like, what? 8? The number
grim,
8.
but it's not that great.
So anyways, they were all suffering from malnutrition. Aniel Arnaud, Alicia's son, the youngest one, was suffering from rickets and could not walk, relying on 11-year-old Francisco Ira to carry him on his back to get around. 2 men were dispatched to go to the island and kind of check it out, see what's going on, and they had experience with the effects and deaths of scurvy. So basically, they would know what to look for when they're examining these graves and so on.
Mm-hmm.
When they found Alvarez, he was lying in a pool of his own blood with a shattered skull.
Real subtle there, folks.
So the men thought back to the story that was told that basically came back and reported it to the captain. The captain, based on the accounts from the survivors, refused to put the murder in his report and basically just listed it as a death from scurvy. Alvarez's body was left for the crabs.
Honestly,
Yeah.
for the best.
Yeah.
I'm glad he understood that.
So wait, how do we have record of this? If there's like nobody reported it.
So he did write letters to his wife detailing what happened. And then later, a lot of these accounts were made into books, and these women kind of gave interviews and so on. Alicia Arnaud was reunited with her father, Felix Rovira. Essentially, the Mexican government had told families of these colonists, erroneously, that all the colonists were dead.
Oh!
So for the last 3 years...
people in the story.
No.
So basically for the last 3 years, they had just been sitting there forgotten entirely by their government, and just basically people were told that they're dead. So there's no need to send supply ships. They're dead. The island still sits there uninhabited. It's a French property now because...
Again?
Well, no. What ended up happening was the dispute that happened for a long time was actually put forward to the Vatican to decide on an actual claim of land back in 1909.
Mm-hmm.
And that was eventually the Vatican kind of decided that they wanted to leave the decision to somebody else. So they gave the decision to King Emmanuel III of Italy. And in the treaty that was signed between France and Mexico was that each nation would abide by whatever the decision was. So they made this decision in 1909. Now, the king's decision eventually came in 1931.
Take your time there, buddy.
Yeah. And
really.
It was officially decided to be a French possession. The French rebuilt the lighthouse and set up a military outpost, which they do come around and they check on the military outpost. There's a ham radio there that they can use, so on. There were a couple castaway stories, and like one in 1962 where a boat basically capsized and the survivors ended up on this island. Eventually were saved by the French military coming by to check up on the island. But that's basically the end of that whole story. He ended up dead. They kept going. I guess the kids had a long life after that, I would hope.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of descendants still around. After
all that, eventually some king in Italy decides it belongs to France.
It's not yours anymore.
Yeah.
So, that's the whole story.
Go colonialism. Everybody sucks.
Yeah!
Hooray!
Except the Native Americans, because they didn't go and colonize anything.
Well, yeah, they're not part of colonialism. They're just on the butt end of it.
Yeah, they just got a bad rep.
Yeah.
Or I guess not a rep, more of
the rough end of the stick.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
They drew the short straw, that's for sure.
Yeah, they got the guano end of the stick.
Yeah.
Well, that was an interesting story. We had some funny moments, and then we had a moment where I was so invested and upset that I had to shut myself up so intently that I had to focus on the story.
And in all honesty, that's part of the reason that I did this story was because after last week's whole, unsolved, no resolution, I felt that maybe it'd be nice to have somebody have their comeuppance. So
yeah. This wouldn't be like... Where would we register this in a genre? Like this would be like, I guess, just a historical?
Basically.
Because it's definitely not true crime.
No, there's no full investigation or anything. Yeah. It's just a horrific thing of history. So
I'm just wondering because we do a lot of like true crime, but we do want to spread out and stuff. I was just internally kind of going like, this is another really interesting thing over here and over here. Yeah.
But kind of like, how the rock apes were. It's not exactly there's no way of that being a true crime. It's not like Bernard the Batutu went out and killed somebody. And now we have Reginald.
Reginald the fish. We should introduce the two.
Yeah. Well, they both have British accents.
Yeah. Well, hello, Bernard. I see that you are a rock ape that is quite enjoyable. And then did Bernard just speak the same way?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, hello, Reginald. You are a fish in a small coral reef in the middle of an island and barely survivable. No, I didn't realize that when you said it. Oh, I'm dying.
That's the only way that works.
That's the fish flopping. Help me, Bernard. Nope, that's dinner tonight. Rocket.
No, Bernard, don't throw him.
But he flopped in the right direction. Well, that was a good episode. I'm actually kind of exhausted. I think I worked way too hard that episode.
Finally slowed you down.
Shut up! I'm never stopping again. Isn't that right, Frederick? Oh, right. Frederick left.
Yeah, left.
Frederick was the one who abandoned Reginald.
That's true.
I'm keeping my canon, okay?
Oh, the Chaos verse is going to be so complex.
Yeah.
The group shot will be amazing.
Yeah. Oh my god, that'll be hilarious. I would love to see a picture of Reginald and Bernard and the one Canadian-Mexican guy who tells the Mexicans about their new president. Yeah.
Oh my god. All right, I say some fish over there.
Oh, hey, I noticed you guys got a lot of crabs, eh? I'd like a few, if you don't mind. We don't have that.
We'll give you some crabs.
Oh, that's perfect. Thanks very much. Why are we heading over to Peter's, eh? Oh, I forget that American audiences wouldn't get that, like us, because we are from Canada down USA.
In Middle Dakota.
All right, that's our show. Do the wrap up, and then we'll say goodbye.
So, like I said, if you enjoyed that,
okay,
that's right.
If you enjoyed that, beyond Wes's honey today, you give us a rate, review. It really helps out on the business end. We don't care what you say. You can say whatever you want. Also, follow us on Instagram or Twitter at BAChaosJar. And then follow us on, like us on Facebook.
Yep.
And go to our Patreon page. Essentially the same thing, patreon.com/chaosjar. We have different tiers. Eventually we'll start reading out people's names at the end of this to, be our executive producers.
We're going to have people and their names.
Yeah. You can also do donations on PayPal. That's linked in the show notes. Just if you want to be a really nice person.
Yeah, I want to point down like this is like a YouTube video and say
right
down there, right over there. See there, that there,
right in the
there.
description,
right in the description below. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah, make sure to ring the little bell. But yeah, that's it for today.
Yeah, have a good night, folks.